Hey, true believers, do you love politics? Do you love comic books? Well, Superhero Politics is for you. It combines the comical nature of politics and the political nature of comic books. Join us, like, share, and experience the world of comics and politics in a way that you never have before. This is Superhero Politics, and I'm your host, Michael Holmes. Welcome back, everyone, to the newest episode of Superhero Politics. I am your host, Michael Holmes, and what you just heard on the intro was the OG 1990s X-Men theme, and those mighty Marvel mutants will be part of our subject for today when we talk about black voters and how black voters have fought for a world that appears to hate and fear them, much like the mutants of Marvel's X-Men have done in their mission for mutant acceptance and mutant rights. So just a little backstory about X-Men. In 1963, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee introduced this group of superhumans who were appeared to be the next step in human evolution. So they were born with what was called the X gene, and it imbued them with fantastic powers of all varieties. So you had some who had physical manifestations of power, like, enhanced speed, enhanced strength, animalistic qualities. And then you had some, with powers, like telepathy and telekinesis, ferrokinetic, magnetism, and so just a varied amount of different powers. And so as the world continued to discover the existence of mutants, they realized that, hey, these, just like Homo sapiens replaced the Neanderthals or Homo erectus, that Homo superior would come along and replace Homo sapiens. So the world just kind of banded together to suppress mutants. Charles Xavier, who himself was a mutant, world's most powerful telepath, decided that in order for mutants to change the perception of their race, their species amongst humans, they would have to be better. They would have to, become heroes, show that their powers could be used for good, and gain acceptance by good works and great examples. So, on the flip side of that, you also had, mutants who believed that their, powers gave them an inherent superiority. So they did not want integration with, normal, what as they call flat-skinned mutants. So you had that dichotomy. And the reason why this is important politically is because this was at the same time that the American Civil Rights Movement was exploding on the public consciousness. So even after slavery, even after Reconstruction, Jim Crow, integration, in the 60s, there was still this debate among society about the level of humanity that black people possessed. And so this allegory between mutants fighting for acceptance in a world that hated and feared them, went right in line with black people fighting for, equal rights and equality and acceptance into a country that still hated and feared them as well. And even deeper than that, so if you go back and you look at the time between the dichotomy within the black community about whether or not we wanted to integrate into this society, you had, Dr. King, who preached, nonviolent protest, who talked about integration, who talked about living alongside. And then you had, the Malcolm X had Malcolm X, who said, this was, not the black man's country. This was not the country for African Americans. You can see it in the way that they treated us. You can see it in the way that they rejected our assimilation into society. And so if you juxtapose that between what Jack Kirby and Stan Lee created with Charles Xavier and Eric Lensher, who would become known as Magneto, you had this reflection of what was happening in society with white America and in the integration of African Americans. Now, oddly enough, you had Eric Lensher, who was a Jew, who survived the Holocaust, and Charles Xavier, who was a white man. Both white, and all the original mutants in the X-Men lineup were white. So, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Beast, Hank McCoy, Angel, Warren Worthington, and then Iceman, Bobby Drake. So they were all white. The first African American, or the first black character, wasn't brought into the X-Men until 1975 when Storm joined the team. Storm is now one of the most famous characters in all of comicdom, and one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel universe. So the first black character didn't join until 1975, but the relationship between African American struggles in reality versus the struggle of mutants in reality was well documented. It was something that was cognizant on the minds of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. It was something that they looked at in crafting this story for Marvel. And so, the X-Men often went into battle for society, knowing that they were not going to be accepted, knowing they were going to have suspicion heaped upon them, knowing that their powers made them untrustworthy by broader society, knowing that their very existence caused a backlash among normal humans that allowed them to assemble, create hate groups, pass legislation barring mutant rights. And so much like what happened post Reconstruction, so you had the rise of the KKK, you had segregationist laws, Jim Crow, you had all these things that suppressed African Americans. You had very arcane, restrictive voting rights that limited black people's participation in the democratic process. And so, as these stories emerged, they converged. And so, we look at where the stories of X-Men are today, and we look at how African American voters are being treated. Now, for those of you who don't know, or might be listening for the first time, I'm an elected official. I've, got elected in 2019. I'm in my first term, finishing up the first year of my first term as a city councilman. And so I get a chance to talk to voters of all stripes. So I get a chance to talk to white voters. I get a chance to talk to black voters. And that dichotomy is still real. There are some black voters that say, yeah, we got to just keep pushing. We just got to keep pushing. We just got to keep setting the example. And then you have some that say, man, screw this. Like, F this. Like, why are we participating in this when nothing ever changes? Why are we participating in this when all they're doing is trying to take away my, American right to vote? Like, why are they closing down polling places in black neighborhoods? Like, why are they, continuing to put in, ID laws that target African Americans? Like, why are they continuing to do this? And then you hear just the frustration from, black veterans that said, man, I fought for this country. Like, I watched black men die on the battlefield for this country to come back to this. Like, this is the reward that we get for putting our lives on the line to build this democracy. Like, this is it. This can't be the promise of America. Like, why does this country, no matter how much we love it, why does this country, no matter how much we, lay our blood and sweat and tears and limbs and mental health on the line, why does this country continue to hate me and fear me? And so, you would think that here we are in the year of our Lord 2020, about to be 2021, where we've seen historic progression. We've seen black CEOs, and we've seen black presidents, and we've seen now a black elected female vice president. Why is that causing so much fear and trepidation among white voters? Well, I think it's just for the same principle that we read about in the X-Men comics. We look at the power of, what the X-Men possesses, what mutants possess. And, there's an obvious kind of fear is, okay, if they decided at this point to turn on us with all that power, could we stop them? And, I've been listening to former President Barack Obama's book, A Promised Land. And, he talks about how his election was almost seen as like a harbinger of the end for, white status in this country. And, in a lot of ways, you can identify with that. Like, I can identify with that. Like, I'm right now in a city where I'm one of 4 African-American males who are on city council. And that's the first time in the city's history. And you heard, and like we heard the whispers, some people said, oh man, this is great. This is progress. But you also heard that undercurrent of, well, what are they going to do? Well, are they going to try to do reparations? Or are they going to try to close down white businesses? We heard all kinds of ridiculous, conspiracy theories. And I'm thinking, dude, this is a city of 115, 20,000 people. Like, calm down. We can only do so much. But when you move from a system where, one group has always been supreme to where their power appears to be less, you have this, kind of irrational fear of the unknown, of what this group is going to do. And so, you think about how this played out as, hate groups arose, in comics. And so the irony of what happened in the X-Men comics is that the hate group was called Friends of Humanity. Now, Friends of Humanity was like a super diverse group. Like, you had Asian and black and white. Like, it was all, races of humanity, Homo sapiens versus mutants. And, the mutant community was just as diverse. I mean, you had, people that looked like birds, and you had people that looked like, wolves, and you had people that could fly, and people that, so it was, diversity on both sides. But when you talk about, hate groups, you normally think of hate groups as a very homogenous type of group. Like, it's all like one group hating another group. Like, you think about white supremacist movements, and you think, oh, it's just this group of angry white people who just hate, Hispanics and Asians and Muslims and black people, and they just hate anybody who's non-white. And so, now what we're seeing is the rise of these groups. They're multiplying as the country becomes more diverse, as demographics continue to push their way into the white majority percentage. Like, you're starting to see these groups pop up, and there's not an empathy, but you can almost understand the fear. When you've never had to be special to be successful, when you just had to have this one singular qualification, like, I just had to wake up and be white. Like that's all I had to do. Like I didn't have to be special. I didn't have to, be exceptionally intelligent or exceptionally innovative. I just had to wake up and be white, and I had a chance. Well, as the country begins to kind of balance out, in a racial demographic sense, now you actually have to compete. And so, what actually happens is because of the suppressive nature of policies that have happened, for centuries in this country, what you've actually done is, and guys, this is completely, theoretical here. So what we're arguing is not that black people are mutants, or minorities are mutants, but what you've done is you force minority communities to evolve. You force the evolution of minority communities, because when you've had to do nothing but be white and you have a chance, that means as a minority, as a black man, as a black woman, as an Asian American, as a Hispanic, as an immigrant, you had to be spectacular to make it. You had to be twice as educated. You had to be twice as innovative. You have to be twice as articulate. You had to be 3 times as creditworthy. All these things you had to be. So there was a forced evolution of minorities by this suppressive tactics of this of racist society. And so now, as these barriers are being stripped away, what you're seeing is that you had this group of white America who's just been now facing this group of, evolved minority groups who are, as educated or if not more, as innovative or not more. Right now, the most educated group of people in this country, the most educated demographic of people in this country is African American women. The fastest growing group of business owners in this country are African American women. And so the Latino population, the Latinx population right now is growing faster than any population in this group. And so what you're seeing is like this, this awareness coming about, like, damn, like they're really coming on, like they really have these abilities. And so we've seen the shift in some areas where black people were excluded. Now you look at things like sports and entertainment. So at one point, most of professional sports were not integrated. So, from, 1940, 1950, when, Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, what you've seen is a steady progression of the transformation of sports demographically. So you had the NBA that had like one or two black players to now the NBA being 75% black. Now you've seen the NFL, which had 1 or 2 black players to now being 80% black. And so some of those who are racially anxious, I'm gonna use that term, racially anxious, air quotes. They see these kind of microcosm. These areas, kind of microcosm of the country, and they think, well, damn, they took over football, they took over basketball. What's going to happen if they get into politics? What's going to happen if they get into business? Like, are they going to force us out? Like, are they going to do to us what was done to them? And so you see this racial anxiety and this anxiousness because we've been forced to be better, we've been forced to evolve ourselves. Now it's okay. Now we fear what could become of them gaining power, and it's completely unfounded. Like, I mean, I make this argument not to be incendiary or controversial, But this is a real concern out there among white America. Like, you look what happened in Charlottesville. You look what happened, with the militia groups that took over Michigan, took over the governor's, mansion in Michigan. The plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer. Like, you look at things like that. Like, you look at how these groups, like the Proud Boys and things like that, who are centered around white supremacy, what's driving these things? Like, you go back and you look at the number of hate groups that existed in, say, 2006, and then you go and look at the number of hate groups that existed in 2012. It's like a 400% increase. What happened during that period? Yeah. America elected its first black president. America elected its first black president. You had a 400% increase in white supremacist groups in this country. So, what does this country do when faced with a burgeoning population shift, which inevitably will lead to a economic power shift, a social influence power shift, a political power shift? 25 or 30 years from now, you could have every major corporation in this country run by someone who's non-white. You could have, almost every single, legislature in this country, with a majority of non-white people. You could have, the Congress of the United States with a majority of non-white people in 35 years. So what does this country do? How does this country handle it? Does it embrace the diversity? Does it embrace the population? Does it say, yes, you guys are part of the fabric of this country? Or do you continue to fight? Do you continue to resist the evolution of this country, much like in the X-Men comics, where you resisted the rise of mutant race? Well, I think our answer is pretty clear. It seems like America's going to fight it. You would think that after the election of the first African American president, two-term, elected president, there would be some standards. There would just be some base standards for what this country would look for in an executive leader. But I'm going to go on a limb and say there really ain't. I mean, we've had an election, and, after 4 years of Donald Trump and the divisive rhetoric and giving, carte blanche to say and do whatever they would, need to say and do by, some of the worst elements of, racist elements of this country. America repudiated it. Not fully, not completely, but at least at the presidential level. Now, the Republican Party is still, rife with racism and bigotry and phobias and all kinds of things. And I'm not absolving Democrats here, because, there's a Malcolm X once said that, the white liberal is just as dangerous as the white conservative. And so we see some of these things, on both sides of the aisle. And I'm not gonna, both sides this thing. I'm not gonna do that, because it's certainly not, it's not equal. This polarization in this country is definitely asymmetric. It's not equivalent. But what we are forced to deal with is, how do we go about it? What tactic do we take? Do we take the Charles Xavier, Dr. King route? Or do we take the Magneto, Malcolm X route? Like, what do we do as is black voters. Like, where do we go from here? How do we approach this? But I know, as a black voter, as a black man, as a black elected official, it can get to the point to where you feel like this country is rebelling against your very existence. I mean, look at what's going on right now. The Republican Party is essentially attacking the results of this election. I mean, they're essentially attacking it. But once again, it's not equal. All these attacks on democracy are not equal. So if you look at where they're challenging the vote totals, it's in none of the states that Trump won. It was, it's not in North Carolina. It's not in South Carolina. It's not in West Virginia. It's not in even in Florida. And, they're saying, well, these vote totals are too close. They're much too close for us just to take in, with any certainty. This was a unprecedented election with the pandemic, and we've got to be, very clear that, there's no election fraud. If you guys know Donald Trump's history, everything that goes against him is fraud. I mean, so, that's not something that we didn't expect him to say. I mean, he telegraphed this. But all in all, if you look at where they're challenging the vote totals, what do these places have in common? Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta. These are all places that the GOP has targeted in states that if they were able to flip these states, that would give Trump the Electoral College victory. What do those four major places have in common? Because Biden was able to flip all of those states. He was able to flip Wisconsin. He was able to flip Michigan. He was able to flip Pennsylvania. And he was able to flip Georgia, all on the strength of the turnout in urban areas amongst black voters. And so, despite Arizona going for Joe Biden for the first time since 1992, not really expending a lot of energy out there. Why? Because Trump made a lot of inroads with Hispanic voters in this election. Now, I mean, to his credit, I mean, it burns my mouth to say so. He made some inroads with black voters too. But he made inroads to a much greater degree with Hispanic voters. Now, Hispanic voters overwhelmingly still chose Biden in Arizona. But he didn't. But they're not really challenging those outcomes and that result. Now, why is that? Because they still feel like they can win Hispanic voters in the future. If they can start to siphon off Hispanic voters from the Democratic Party, cobbling that with the shrinking white majority, they may just be able to hold on to power for the longest period of time because the Hispanic population is growing. So whatever they lose in terms of the white vote, white voters that may, vote Democratic and, white voters that may be part of the shrinking population, or the shrinking majority, if they can add that percentage back with Hispanic voters, that still may give them enough to produce majorities in enough states for the Electoral College. But if this was a singularity, if this period of time where, 14% or 15% of African American males and 7% of African American females decided to vote Republican in this election, even though overwhelmingly, better than 87% of African Americans voted Democrat in enough numbers in these areas to strategically flip these states. If this was a singularity and then the next election, things regress back to the mean and African Americans go for, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in 2024, or, maybe Kamala Harris and someone else in 2024, they go back to 90% and this map holds. There's no pathway via popular vote or electoral college for the Republican Party. So what do they have to do? They have to kind of create this narrative of a nefarious, evil, creeping overtake by black voters. So it's strategically attacking the black centers of electoral power. Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, Detroit, you've got Philadelphia, you've got Pittsburgh, you've got, Atlanta, you've got DC, you've got Detroit, you've got all these places where African Americans are the majority and they exercise their power. Now, it's enough if you, couple that with California and New York and, possibly in the next few years, Texas, it's enough that no matter what happens, Republicans can't win the presidency. So if you delegitimize these black power centers enough to where you can convince enough white people that these votes are fraudulent, you may have a chance to kind of invalidate our election system. Like, how do we do it now? Like, what do we do now? Like, what do we do? If no election is seen as legitimate, what do we do? But that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about the nature of black voters and why it is so easy to convince white people that what black people do is nefarious. Now, we see how African Americans can be on the street, minding their own business, at a barbecue, selling, little girls selling water. And we see just random white people trying to get into the pool, random white people just coming up every day and saying, hey, what are you doing there? There was an act back in, post-slavery where you had to carry your papers as a black man or a black woman. You had to carry your papers to show that you were not still a slave. And any white person could just walk up to you and challenge your freedom. Like, they could just walk up. You could be, at the general store. And they could just walk up and say, hey there, boy, show me your papers. And you had to produce these papers to prove to, Joe White dude that you were a free person, that you weren't somebody's property. So now here we are in 2020, where black people have to prove to America that our votes are not fraudulent. Same black people that went to war, like my great-grandfather in World War I. Like both of my grandfathers in Korea, like my uncles in the Marines, like my cousins who have served in every branch of the armed forces, like, myself who ran for public office to be a public servant. We continue to put ourselves on the line, and this country continues to return our service with hatred. So just like the Xmen, who continue to put their lives on the line, every time you have an invasion, every time Galactus decides he wants to eat the earth, every time, some subterranean creature decides they want to burrow up from the molten magma of the earth's core and destroy a city, the X-Men rush into danger, only to have people throw bottles at them and crack their heads, bust their heads open. we're in the same situation here now. Guys, this podcast is, me just kind of getting my thoughts out because, politics, comics have been on the forefront of politics and vice versa since the beginning of this country. They say Ben Franklin was the first, political cartoonist. But ever since comics have come into existence, they've paralleled our society. And so you may or may not get this comparison. You might not. You might think, oh man, that's dumb. But if you get into either side of this, and I hope you do. I hope you go pick up some of the X-Men titles and some of the older ones. Go pick up some of the X-Men titles and sit down and take a look at some of the comparisons of how this country has rewarded, black service. You see that some of these things are, they kind of track. But I guess if I had to put myself in a camp here, I guess if I had to put myself, whether I'm, in a Magneto or Xavier, like some days I wake up and, I'm able to help a constituent. I'm able to, solve a problem for them, and I feel like, yeah, this is the way this thing is supposed to go. And then sometimes, I wake up to a Facebook DM or an email, questioning my integrity, or questioning why, whether or not I care for my district, and you're like, why the hell did I do this again? Like, I could be right here in my life, with my family and not have this headache. And you want to strike back, you want to defend yourself, but that this life of service is, what you signed up for. It's what you decided to do when you decided to run, and so now you have to take all of it. Now, as an elected official, you have, a lot of, power. You have influence, but you also have to, accept the responsibility. And I know, what it says, with great power comes great responsibility. We're not talking about Spider-Man here, but it tracks, and so you have to, you look at what, the president is doing right now. The president ultimate responsibility is to protect the integrity and the sovereignty of this nation. And the bedrock foundation of that is our ability to choose our leaders. If what was happening in America right now was happening in another country, like, we'd be the ones who are rushing in to secure that election. Like, we'd be rushing in there with the UN to secure that election, to support the spread of democracy. But now it's happening here, and the world is rightfully, on pins and needles, because as go the United States, so goes geopolitical alignment. Like, America, unless there's some Skrulls or Shi'ar or Kree or whatever out there that we don't know about, America is the center of the known universe. It is the most advanced country. It is the most militaristically powerful country. It is the wealthiest civilization that's ever existed. We are the center of the known universe. And so if we become unstable, there's no way for the rest of the world to remain stable or to stabilize itself around us. So what's happening right now, at the expense of black voters, is we see possibly the destabilization of our global geopolitical alignment. And I'm not being hyperbolic, because if we can't choose a leader, if we fall into, this despotic, strongman type of leadership, then America becomes corruptible. America is corrupted. And at that point, what's to stop whoever the, de facto autocrat is of the time from, pimping America's military out, as a hit squad. All right. Okay. That got kind of crazy, but that's one of those, far-fetched, conspiracy theories that is permeating our society right now. Things like that used to not, you couldn't even conceive that something like that would happen in American politics or American life, but yet here we are. So, just to kind of wrap this up, guys, black people in this country have laid it on the line. We have put our lives, we have put our livelihoods, we've put our intellectual property, we've put our blood, we put our sweat, our tears, we've put our labor. It's been taken from us. We've done all this thing to build this country. And here we are in the 21st century, the year of our Lord 2020, and our very existence, our very ability to affect change in this country, to exercise our constitutionally given right to vote and to be counted as an American citizen, is under attack. So that, some, pathetic strongman can stroke his ego and remain in power that he didn't earn. And so much like the X-Men, this group of people, this race of people, African Americans, continue to fight to protect and save a country from itself, even though it continues to show its hate and fear of us. Hey, I appreciate y'all being with me this episode. You can find us on Buzzsprout. You can follow us on social at Twitter, Superhero Politics. Just search it. Facebook, same thing. Insta, same thing. You can find us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, everywhere. So like, share, download, subscribe. This is one of those podcasts that's not for everybody, but it's got something for everybody. So if you enjoy it, share it with your friends, get them to share it with their friends, and look forward to being with you next time. So just remember, continue to speak truth to power, and you either live long enough to be a hero, or you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself to become a villain. So peace to you, true believers, and I'm about to get up and away. What's going on, true believers? Thank you for your continued and growing support. If you're enjoying the content that we're producing here on Superhero Politics, I ask that you subscribe anywhere that you can find podcasts. That means iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can find us at Buzzsprout, and also on our social media at Superhero Politics on Twitter, at Superhero Politics on Facebook, Superhero Politics on Instagram, and Superhero Politics on TikTok. Like, share, join us, and if you would have any topics that you would like to share, or just questions that you would like to ask me, you can send your emails to superheropolitics@gmail.com, and we'll do an episode where we answer your questions. Thank you for your continued support. And remember, always speak truth to power.